Hi everyone, this is Dan Clanton, and this is our mini lecture over Trinitarian Controversies. Generally speaking, Trinitarian controversies arose around the pragmatic and conceptual problems associated with the claims that Christ somehow inhabited a human fleshy body at the same time he was in some sense divine. In New Testament literature, we often find claims that seem to imply that Jesus is somehow divine or at least has some sort of special supra-human relationship with God, standing right alongside other clear claims of his humanity. It's also clear from New Testament literature that Jesus and God are imagined as two distinct entities. The reception of these confusing and sometimes contradictory claims in various communities in the 2nd and 3rd centuries lead ultimately to the great Trinitarian controversies that we'll talk about in the 4th and 5th centuries. Now, there were major conflicts, especially in the 4th and 5th centuries, over two central questions. One, if Christ was divine, then what was his relation to the Father? And if Christ was both human and divine, how did these natures relate in him? In the 4th century, we find two main positions. One of these was held by a fellow named Arius, a priest living in Alexandria. His view was that the Son is not identical with the Father. That is, Jesus is not the same as God. I'm quoting here, quote, "Only the Father is eternal. The Son is subordinate to the Father and was created at some point in time." That is, the Son had been created in time. Now, in antiquity, the definition of divinity was something that was unchanging and eternal, something that was not subject to the ravages of time, disease, and old age. So if, according to Arius's view, the Son is not identical with the Father, that the Son was created at some point in time, that means that Jesus was subject to death, decay, and the ravages of time. On the other hand, Athanasius, future bishop of Alexandria, held that, quote, "the Son was begotten eternally." Now, this claim makes Jesus divine. Namely, the Son was of the same substance with the Father. The Greek term that Athanasius uses there is Homoousios. That'll be a very important word for us. As William C. Placher and Derek R. Nelson note, quote, "The conflicts between creating and begetting, between in time and eternally, shaped the debates of Arius and Athanasius. Calling Christ begotten makes him divine and not a creature. That is, not a creature subject to death and decay. Thus, calling the Son begotten implied that, and this became the crucial term for Athanasius, that the Son was of the same substance with the Father." That Greek prefix homo, as you might know, means same, and ousios here is translated as substance. So homoousios, of the same substance. In 325, the Emperor Constantine convened the Council of Nicaea because this argument, this controversy between Arius and Athanasius was threatening the unity of the church in Alexandria. People were fighting in the streets, if you can imagine that. There were fight songs that roving gangs of supporters would sing, and when they would come together, it would be mischief and mayhem in the streets. So Constantine in 325 convenes this Council of Nicaea, at which the Arians were condemned, and Athanasius's position was accepted and incorporated into the Nicaean Creed, one of the first great creedal statements of theological belief in the history of early Christianity. And you can see here the language that's incorporated into the Nicaean Creed that supports Athanasius's position. Begotten, not made, being of one substance, homoousios, with the Father. This language in the Nicaean Creed is incorporated directly from the beliefs of Athanasius. However, this did not end the debate. Some attendees of the Council of Nicaea had a problem with Athanasius's exact identification of Jesus and God, of the Son and the Father. Now, as we mentioned, Athanasius had advocated Homoousios, that is, of the same substance, as the best way to describe how Christ and God were related. Other thinkers at the time, though, thought a better way to describe that relationship was to use the word Homoousios, that is, of a similar substance. You can see there, 1 iota's worth of difference. The question here is, how can the Father and Son be homoousios, of the same substance, but not identical? That is, if God and Jesus are homoousios, then there is somehow only one divine being, and Christianity can honor its origins in Judaism. Judaism, of course, is a religious tradition with a theology of strictly defined monotheism. There is only one God that exists. So homoousios allows early Christianity to retain that emphasis on strictly defined monotheism. But, as I mentioned, the New Testament indicates that God and Jesus are different somehow, as when we hear Jesus praying to God. On the other hand, if God and Jesus are homoousios, of a similar substance, then Christianity opens itself up to the charge that it is a polytheistic tradition. That is, it advocates the existence of more than one deity. This could be problematic for Christianity because part of its acceptance and survival within the Roman Empire was due to its linkage to Judaism, an ancient and respected religious tradition within the Roman Empire. Absent of that connection, Christianity would not be on such sure footing. So, yet another Christological controversy was born surrounding the issue of the Trinity. Now, 3 Cappadocian thinkers, Basil and the 2 Gregories, as I like to call them, would solve this problem, at least for the moment. As Placer writes in his text, quote, "The Cappadocians saved homoousios theology by making a terminological distinction. The problem was how to define the difference among Father, Son, and Spirit if they were of the same substance, that is, homoousios. Using terminology that went back to Origen, the Cappadocians said that God was one ousia, but 3 hypostases. That is, God had only one substance, but 3 equal natures within that one divine substance. These 3 substances act in perfect agreement, and they aren't subject to change, which implies not only unity between the 3, but since they can't change, they are also divine." Now, as you can probably guess, not everyone was satisfied with this Cappadocian solution, and we have more Christological controversies that follow, specifically relating to the divine-human encounter within the Incarnation. As Willard G. Oxtoby writes, quote, "If, as was now declared to be orthodoxy, the eternal Son is co-equal with the Father, then how does the eternal divinity of Jesus relate to his historical humanity?" This is question 2 that we mentioned above. Put differently, is Jesus like Gilgamesh, 2/3 divine and 1/3 human? Is he all divine and only seems to be human? What is the answer to this question? Well, we have several answers, again, as you probably guessed. The first position is found in the thought of the Nestorians, thinkers in Antioch, such as Theodore, and Nestorius. Nestorius becomes Bishop of Constantinople in 428, and these thinkers held that the Logos, this is the term that's used in the first chapter of the Gospel of John to refer to Jesus, the Logos was, quote, an entity distinct from the human personality of Jesus, and as such, they thought that Christ was composed of, quote, two separate persons, one divine and one human. Sounds a little like the Gilgamesh equation, 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. On the other hand, we have the position of the monophysites, and if that word looks familiar to you, it should. The Greek prefix mono means one, and that second part, physite, comes from thusis, that is nature, as we'll see in just a second. The monophysites, teachers like Eutychus taught that, quote, the union of the divine and the human in Christ produced only one nature, that is, a divine one. The human was fully absorbed into or replaced by the divine. Christ, thus, had only one physis, that is nature, hence the name monophysite for this position. After Theodosius II, the emperor, died in 450, imperial protection for this monophysite viewpoint evaporated, and Eutychus, one of their main teachers, was forced to leave his monastery. As we'll see in a second, the Council of Chalcedon, which convened in 451, would soon advocate a medial position to both the Nestorian and the monophysite position, but it's important to remember that the monophysite position continued in the Coptic Church in Egypt, the Jacobite or Syrian Orthodox Church in Syria, and the Armenian Orthodox Church. So the monophysite position did not simply die out, and, as we'll see, neither did the Nestorian position. As I just mentioned, in 451, the Council at Chalcedon adopted a compromise between these two theological claims. That is, the coexistence of both a divine and a human nature in one person. Their confession reads, in part, we confess that one and the same Christ, Lord and only begotten Son, is to be acknowledged in two natures, without confusion, change, division, or separation. These two councils, Nicaea and Chalcedon, really set the tenor of all subsequent discussions on these matters. And that is our mini lecture over Trinitarian controversies. I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing your feedback.